Sorry,
Lakshman,
go ahead.
everything
I was
ready?
just going to test the screen first, Veda. I'll make sure it's working. Yeah, it looks fine. So I'm ready to start.
Great. So, friends, we have Richard from Canada, right, Richard?
Canada, Ottawa.
Ottawa,
Door to Ashley,
among-
who was just talking.
amongst us. And I would like to introduce him and then we can start. So, Richard Fransham became the Fransham. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Fransham.
Fransham
Fransham.
became an advocate for fundamental change in public schools almost from the start of his long career in education. His dissatisfaction with teaching caused him to quit more than once, and his strong advocacy for change resulted in him being reprimanded for not respecting the chain of command. Another time, he was suspended indefinitely for refusing to cease and desist his advocacy. By an unusual alignment of circumstance, he had the opportunity to co-create the CHIP program, CHIP program, that will be introduced in his session. Like so many such programs in public schools, CHIP had a short life because of changes in administration. Having lived through CHIP, the experience of students blossoming, healing when they feel respected and have significant control over their lives, he is now slave to the cause. So let's welcome Richard Fransham. He will be talking about the growing a public school self-directed learning program into system-wide change. Let's welcome our dear friend Richard to this wonderful session. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard. Thank you so much. Let's start.
Thank you, Veda. It was actually, I'm a latecomer to the conference. I've known about IDEC for some time, but latecomer to the conference because it was sitting in on the sessions. I just am so pleased with what I'm hearing. And then I look at the number of people who are attending sessions, and I know that the enrollment is up around 1,000 or so, and that with these conferences, a lot of people are going to get the recordings afterwards and look at it that way. But the numbers speak to the problem that we're having that I'm currently trying to address. And that is that we're talking among ourselves really well. Lots of clarification of ideas, lots of things being tried that we're sharing, but our base is not changing. I go back to the late 60s, and I feel that overall it's looking better now because of the pandemic, but overall I would have said last year, the year before, that we haven't caught up to where we were in the 60s, that we've been losing ground since then. And I think that one of the reasons is that it comes back to an environmental article that I read recently that actually defined what it is that we're attempting to do in Ottawa. And that is, they said one of the reasons that environmental groups haven't had more impact getting changes to environmental policy is that they tend to be too disconnected. They're each working in their own little silos, all good work, but it caps out. You get only so many people following you, and then the others are off in another group. Somehow or other, we have to pull together. And that's what I find with the people who are involved in non-coercive learning, self-directed, democratic learning, that they're too disconnected. They're all off doing their own things. We keep hearing about all this wonderful stuff that's happening through IDEC and Arrow, but it tends to be the same people getting together. And somehow or other, we have to get out there and grow the base. And that's what I hope to focus on today, leave people with something to think about there as to how we get beyond the shadows and come right out into the mainstream and get seen, get noticed. The thing that I thought I'd start with, and I'll share my screen now just to provide a bit of an outline here, and it will help to keep me on track a bit too. And that is the process that I went through, because it's really important that we understand what we're up against. And we're up against something that's very difficult. And I start this off and I say, the people we need to change are like me. And when I say that, it took me years. I started off teaching in 1966, and I had 3 terrible years where I was thinking, I'm not helping here. I can't spend my life doing this, and I quit after 3 years. And you all know that there are numerous teachers that don't last more than 5 years. It's pretty recognized. I kept going back, and initially I was thinking, why do I keep going back? I don't like doing it, but I keep going back. And one of the reasons I came up with was that school had kept me so narrowly focused that I couldn't figure out anything else I wanted to do with my life. Teaching was really all I knew. My parents were teachers, and so my lack of vision for all the other things that could be done in life resulted in me continually going back to teaching. At this stage of my life, I'm really glad that happened, because the journey that I've been on with this and where I am now is I can't imagine doing anything that would give me more sense of purpose than what I'm doing now. And to have a purpose in life, to live with a purpose, to me is a real gift. I wouldn't want to live without purpose, even if it's difficult and challenging at times. So I really like where I am now, but it was hard to get here. And the stages that I went through, and I think they're the stages that we have to take people through if we want to really grow our numbers and get this to become the model that people work with. When I say the model, I'm really talking about the non-coercive Sudbury Valley style education, where nobody's dictating to the kids. You just provide a really good, healthy environment for them. And so my first years of teaching, I realized something was wrong, but I had no idea what. And in my circle, there was nobody that was talking about anything different than conventional education. It kind of comes back to what John Gatto said in Dumbing Us Down, that it's to the great credit of the conventional education system that it's been able to keep people ignorant or blind to, unable to imagine something different. And that's really where we're at. Even when I realized how wrong things were, I couldn't imagine what right was. And so the process here for me, I won't see you because I have the screen share on, but the question, did any of you come across George Leonard's book called Education and Ecstasy? And if the answer to that is, if you were somebody like me struggling in teaching, and then you read that book, you would be overly impressed with it. What it did for me was I had all this turmoil inside that something's wrong, and I had no idea why. And then I read George Leonard, and this is back 1970, read George B. Leonard, and he just defined so well the problems that we now know are epidemic in public education. And so I went from, first of all, this questioning of why am I not being more comfortable in teaching? My father, a teacher, was a charismatic kind of fellow, related well to teachers, to students. And so he was one of those teachers that highly successful within the old system. And then here's his son struggling with it. And I gave my father a copy of Education and Ecstasy, thinking that he would become a champion for change. And he couldn't get past page 10. Here's a very decent man, very caring for kids, but the challenge to him to say more or less that everything that you've been doing through your long career that you thought was helping kids and successful, to challenge that and to suggest that maybe he had gone down the wrong path as far as kids were concerned. That's a hugely painful thing for people to realize. And the longer they've been in education, the less likely they are to understand that. And so Sugata Mitra, talking at an Aero conference, said that we've got to look after the culprits. The culprits are the people who really want to do good, but they don't see a different way of doing it. And if we come up against them, they have the power right now. If we come up against them too hard, the pushback is so strong that they just bury us. And so we have to create a groundswell to get somewhere with it. From realizing something's wrong, you have to progress to the point of a solution. So a discussion with my father and myself, and we disagreed with respect to education, but we were still father-son. So it's not a case of this created a relationship problem between the two of us. But my father, when we were discussing the book, he said, it's just nonsense. I can't tolerate that. And I said that I'm really surprised, because to me, he's defined so well what the problem is in education that I was feeling. And he said, well, what's the alternative? And George Leonard presented an alternative that when you look at it, it's almost a Sudbury Valley school. The students are choosing themselves what to do. I could not fathom that you could just turn kids loose like that at the time. I was so accustomed to being controlled that I was thinking, and for a long time, that if you're not controlling kids, there's going to be chaos. And that's another hard thing to realize, that that's not the case. So once you find the solution, which took me years, you then have the problem of how do you implement it. So I knew that I wanted to implement more of the Sudbury Valley type of education. And yet I also believe in public education. That's where most of the kids are. And that's where my strong belief is that we build community. If we start fragmenting off to independent schools, private schools, magnet schools, what we're doing is we're taking kids out of their neighborhoods to other places, and it starts to make life more anonymous. So the idea of make the school that kids need in their neighborhoods, and they get a sense of community there, no anonymity creeping in, and then that becomes their launch pad to going out in all kinds of ways to expand their world and meet other people. So you're not insular. It's not that idea. The idea is that you're going to use that as a launch pad to go out into all kinds of other things. I've been involved in discussions lately, a book club that we put together, starting off discussing Wayne Jennings' book, School Transformation. And one of the things that he talks about in there is sparks, and how you spark people's interest in something. And a good, healthy, democratic learning environment, to me, just contains all kinds of sparks. The number of students, number of people in the learning community has been debated. We've talked about that a bit in sessions here. Some people putting a number of 150 on it. Scottish clans apparently capped out at about 250 as being the number at which anonymity starts to creep in. And then I mentioned before, and I think Thomas or somebody, Crystal maybe, questioned where I got this information from, that it could go as high as 450 if the students enter early and there's very little attrition. That was a view that Daniel Pink told me when I was talking to him one time, that he thought that it could go that high, but they were looking more at the 250 mark at the time as well. And so the implementation then, having the solution, I'm believing in public education. How do we get this concept into a school? What kind of programs can we do for it? And I wasn't really looking at the time, this would be in the late 80s now, I wasn't really looking at the time to get a program into the public schools, not a school within a school type program. I just wanted to get more of the kind of democratic approach to learning that Derry Hannum talks about in his book. So get people more democratic, treating the kids with more respect. I was kind of in that situation. And then another teacher and I ended up working together on school publications, yearbook, a school newsletter, and a student newspaper. And what we were finding, it was in a high school setting. And what we were finding is the kids that we were getting participating in these after school clubs that were producing those publications, they were so busy with other things that they didn't have enough time to really do what they needed to do with these publications. And so this other teacher and I, actually Coventry, we're struggling with this, that we're doing too much of the work ourselves. I wonder if we can get kids with us during school time to work with this. And so we end up going to the principal and saying, can we just have a group of kids all day long and we'll work on these publications? And as you know, publications, you can open the whole world of learning with them. The writing, the researching, and all the tools that go into the publication. It's a door to the world, basically. So we went in there, and I'd already more or less become sold on Sudbury Valley School. And we went in there and said to the principal, who was very supportive of the work we were doing in the school, that we want to run this Sudbury Valley type model. And he said that there's no way that you can have kids for a whole day and just do what you want there, working on these publications. The ministry requires that kids be enrolled in 4 ministry credits. And so it looked like it was kind of dead at that point, but the principal was really somebody that we've been talking about. Derry does a great job of explaining it. He was a responsible subversive. He wanted to make something different happen. And what we ended up getting was this CHIP program, which was, and I still believe it, as close as you can get to a self-directed type learning program, mainstream, in a high school with existing rules and regulations. In other words, that if you have a couple of teachers in a school and a willing, supportive principal, you can run that kind of program, this CHIP program, which I'll explain a bit, and you don't need any kind of permission from any higher up. Obviously, the superintendent's going to be involved and the director's going to be involved, but if the principal is for it, in the boards that I've worked in, quite often the higher ups will say, "We'll give it a try. We'll see what happens." And that was kind of what happened. There's another big story as to how it unfolded, and I refer to it as an accidental program, because I could take the same thing, and I kept doing so after I saw it work. I kept taking it to other principals and another school board that I worked in, and things just lined up. It'd be too long a story to say how, but it was really quite amazing. And so we ended up with this CHIP program, which I've written up in a website called OPERI, or the Ottawa Public Education Remake Initiative. So this describes the program. Basically what it was is we got permission to have the same group of students full-time for a whole semester, a little bit of cross-age mix, grade 10 to 12. We had been asking for a full age mix of the students in the school, but there was a ministry program coming in at the time. It was a grade 7 to grade 12 school. And ministry was bringing in a special program at the time for grades 7 to 9. And so we weren't allowed to interfere with that, but we could do something with the grade 10 to 12. So we had this cross-age mix of grade 10 to 12 students, just 25 of them. We were assigned to a single classroom. So we had a a home base there. And the idea was that they would work independently on these 4 ministry courses that students were required to take. And so essentially what that meant was they had control over how they learned, but not over what they learned. A nice thing that we found out, and we've seen it with the pandemic also, is that when students are free to learn the ministry curriculum on their own, if they don't have to lockstep with the rest of a class, they complete those objectives in a fraction of the time. A lot of the time they already know the things, so they can just check off what they're supposed to have learned. Other times they can integrate it with other things that they have to learn, so they're checking off 2 or 3 course items at the same time. And so that left them in this program with all kinds of extra time to pursue what they wanted to pursue. That was a bit of a discovery. We hadn't anticipated that. One of the courses they had to take was math. And our thought with the math was that it's so rigorous and they're so dependent on teachers to teach it that that's going to be a weak spot. And we actually thought that we're not going to run the program because we were afraid that they had us so constrained that we'd end up being an example of why not to do something rather than why to do it. As it turned out, I was anticipating, I was the math teacher. I was anticipating that I was going to have to be tutoring the kids practically every minute of the day. And they also had art, computers, and English as their other subjects that they were working on. Those are not so dependent on getting the prereq information for the next grade. And they get marked a little differently. So especially the computers at the time, the early 90s. And so there was really no curriculum for computers at the time. And I could pretty much set the standard that I wanted there. But the English was a little bit of a concern. Art, again, was like play, free to do what you want, be creative. But the math we had concern about. And I think maybe I tutored students twice. The whole cross-age business kicked in. Their resourcefulness of getting people here and there, anywhere to help them kicked in. And also we presented it to them at the time. One of the colleges here in Ottawa was requiring first-year students to take what they called an analytical reading course. And they described that as the ability to be able to read a manual. And we translated that into, well, learn to read the math book and teach yourself math, and you'll have more than the analytical skills that the college is looking for. And so we presented the math that way, that here's your math textbook, but don't think about learning math, think about becoming a really good analytical reader. And if at some point you bog down in the description, then bring it to me, and we'll look at where you start to have trouble understanding the concept that's being presented. And quite often it's just a little bit of mental agility, that you're not looking at something from quite the right angle. And as soon as you get that little bit of refocusing done, the student is free to go again. And they did a lot of learning in that way. There was also just being with the other students was really the decider there. This whole cross-age mix, the power of that. And to think that for decades, the conventional school system has kept segregating kids. It's like not working your very best resource. And so that all came into play there. The program ran. We saw that, okay, you can run a program like that and have a lot of success from it. A couple of stories before I go on, and maybe just to get rid of me doing all the talking, I'll give you 3 little stories that came out of that program, and maybe we can have a little sharing moment where you can tell us stories from your experiences that might be similar. The one that I most often tell speaks right to the heart of our concern over racism, discrimination of any sort. The two criteria for being able to get into this program, and it was this cross-section of the school population. It wasn't kids that had any kind of learning problem at all. We wanted to see if this would work for just your regular mainstream students. And the only criteria for them to get in was that they had to be coming to school to learn. They weren't to see this as a chance to goof off, which when you've been under the thumb of people for years, you take advantage of time, use it differently, maybe not to your best advantage until you heal. And we didn't think we had healing time. Just from things that from Summer Hill, A.S. Neal said, referring to lesson aversion, that he was finding that it took about 6 weeks for kids to get over feeling suppressed by mandatory courses and actually wanting to go and start attending courses again. And we were thinking, well, 6 weeks into a 4-month semester with a rigorous math program, we don't have time to wait for that. But it did work out. And from the idea of the solution, I'll get to that at this point. Oh, to the story, sorry, losing my track a little bit. One of the stories is related to, refocus here just a moment. The two criteria, you had to be coming to school to learn. The other criteria was that you would help us to create a learning environment. And the first story is related to that agreement of students that they, by joining the program, would work to create a community of learners. Two of the grade 12 boys came to me about 6 weeks into the program with a confession. They were really into computers at the time. Interesting story as to why they joined the program and the access they had to resources that the school didn't have. So there's a story there as to how when you loosen things up, you can get community resources into the classroom more than otherwise. At any rate, they want to come in and work on the computer courses. And they said to me that when they came into the program, they really didn't buy into this idea of creating a community of learners, that they didn't want to have anything to do with the low grade 10 kids. They just wanted to do their own thing. And they then confessed that we don't even notice the age differences anymore. And so when you get people living together, learning together on a competency-based arrangement, all of this sense of discrimination just, it goes away. And we saw that not just with the ageism that these older kids felt towards the younger ones. We saw it with a kid, one in particular, who at the time it was kind of gothic trench coat time for the kids that were most opposed to school. And this was a student, he was in grade 12, he was ready to drop out of school. His girlfriend was pregnant. Everything was going wrong for him. And he was basically shunned as he walked down the hall of the school, very alone character. In this room, this program, he became a respected member. He became what we called the resident artist because he was very much into art at the time. And when his girlfriend gave birth, the support that he got from the other students in that class was really quite amazing. It went from a student being shunned to a student who had family, had a sense of belonging. And you can't see those things happen without being touched by it. It comes right back to what Peter Gray was saying yesterday, that to be happy, you don't need math, you don't need reading or writing, but you need to know how to get along with people. And this program, by us living together, allowed us to do that. It doesn't mean the relationships were perfect, but it means that the differences weren't because of people feeling oppressed. It was because people both wanted the same thing at the same time. And then you're into the democratic process of working out the differences, which is all part of our socialization and learning the skills to get along with people. So very powerful that way. Another example was a couple of girls, grade 11, in the art course. And there was a daycare across the street. And they had been dropping in there because they were interested in the younger kids, and we were able to give them the freedom to go over there. And they came back one day and asked my co-teacher, Ashley, if they could create a playhouse for those kids. And it meant that we were going to have a big construction right in the middle of the classroom. And the group agreed that, yeah, that would be fine. And so the girls arrived the next day with a great big cardboard box from a refrigerator that had been bought. And they spent about 2 weeks climbing in and out of that, decorating it for art credit. And there was one moment where one of the grade 11 girls looked outside a little window they had created in the box and said, "Oh, look at us, we're playing like little kids." And for a grade 11 girl in a high school to so uninhibitedly being able to declare that was one of those moments where you just feel that it's genuine, that something good is happening here. Final story, Lord of the Flies, Kids in Charge. Grade 10 had to read the book. The grade 10s had gotten together. They decided they'd have a little group discussion. And the grade 12s, grade 11s had read the book earlier. It had been brewing as to whether kids can be in charge. And here they are in a program that's challenging them to be in charge. And so all of a sudden, the entire class is involved in this really dynamic, heated discussion that I could never, as a teacher, have been able to manipulate the students into a situation like that. It had to be a happening. And these kinds of happenings we saw regularly. So if you're interested, anybody, if you'd like to maybe share a story that you had, so we can start getting that feel out there to tell to other teachers that if we just let kids be, as Carl Rust says, they're going to do very well. And Daniel Greenberg says that too. Our greatest gift to the kids of Sudbury Valley is to let them be. Anybody want to contribute a story similar to mine? Yes, Thomas. I guess
Yeah, I've got a few, but can you help us with the acronym CHIP? We're having some fun
yes.
chat trying to guess that.
Yeah. So when we gone in to see the principal, he and we had gotten the permission to run this. He said, "Okay, now you have to give me a name for the program that we can put on the course selection sheet, and it can't be more than four letters long." And so the my co-teacher Ashley and I went off at that point. We spent about 2 hours trying to come up with something that had any kind of meaning to it. And we were struggling with it. We had words of all sorts down, trying to come up with an acronym. And we ended up with CHIP, which was C for communication, H for hands-on learning, the I was for the integration of the subjects, and the P was for problem solving. And we thought, well, let's put them together into the word CHIP, and the word CHIP will kind of suggest modern education, the computer chip and technology, and so to reflect things from that point of view. It Ashley was Black, and so it led to a lot of jokes. We go down the hall. Teachers would say, "Don't you look chipper today?" And "Oh, you're just a couple of chips off the old block," and things like that. But when it came to Hat Day, the one day of the year that students were allowed to wear hats, our students made us a chocolate chip and a vanilla chip. And so they were just perfectly comfortable with color. It wasn't a case of being blind to it. It was a case of, "Oh, you're Black, you get the chocolate chip hat, and you're white, you get the vanilla chip hat." And so just a fun moment for the class, and kind of an indication that color didn't mean anything to them other than something visual. They really grew to love Ashley. He was there are not a lot of black teachers around at the time, not enough still, but he was unusual that way, and he was just such an asset to the program, just a loving, caring guy. And so that's Chip. That's where that name comes from. Do you have a story, though, Thomas, that you can share?
Yes. And I'm going to tell a story from my time on staff at the Sudbury School. And the big news there was how happy they all were all the time. There were some times where some conflict was there, but that was such a rare exception. So it was pure joy, pure happiness there. The parents told me, I was there in the afternoons, the parents would tell me that the young people were waiting at the door to leave the house to go to their clubhouse in the morning. And I could see that it was almost impossible for the parents to get the young people out of the clubhouse to go home at the end of the day. Right. That's how much the love was there. There's one quick story, though. There's only 20 students in the school, but it was a full blown operational Sudbury model. There was a young girl who was old enough to be reading some thick books, and that's all she wanted to do is just leave me alone. I'm going to read, right? And that's what she did. And then somehow, a new rule got passed at the school meeting that was somehow against what she was relying on. And there was a couple of weeks where she was crying because she was so against this new rule. But she had to, I mean, it wasn't for the adults to help her not be that sad, but it was for us to be role models to say, well, this is the process. You put an agenda item on for the next school business meeting. We'll discuss the rule and have another vote. And the older students were given that same feedback. But it took this young girl a few weeks to work through that process. And I'm sharing that as a story because that is the very epitome of the Sudbury model, is that if you don't like something, we have a process for you to have your voice, find your voice, share your voice, interact with other people about why things should change the way that you would advocate. So it's a huge arena for this young person to get out of her books, not because anybody told her to, but because she wanted to make a change in her reality of the self-regulated society. And that to me is a clear evidence of the amazing power of a Sudbury model to help people learn that and to help them be big and bold enough to do what's needed to make change.
I just looked at time here, and I understand a little better now why, or how it is that people accuse me of going on too long at times. Maybe one more story. I really want to get to the process that we need to go through, as I see it, for growing our base, getting more people talking about this publicly. Thomas, thanks for that story. I'm going to respond to it a little bit. And Derry, do you want to give us one more? I think you're muted there.
I've got a story you haven't heard. You've heard most of them, but I've got one you haven't heard if you want another one. But maybe we've had enough.
Yeah, no, give us a quick one, Derry. I always love your stories. And then Andrea, if I'm saying your name right, maybe we can get a quick story from you too, and then we'll carry on.
Well, my story started in a big school trying to do things in another way, and starting with one, I think it would be in your 11, 12-year-old, is that grade 7 in the States? It started with one class, and then it spread when the kids moved into grade 8. It spread through the whole year group, 220, 230 kids. And the school rules didn't allow the kids in the buildings at lunchtime and recess. And this year group of kids had created a kids' parliament, and they had all sorts of activities going on during the lunchtime, and they wanted access to the school. So they did a deal with the head teacher and said, we'll absolutely indemnify you against any damage if that's what you're worried about. We'll repair anything that gets broken, and on condition that you let us into the school. So he did it. It rather upset the older kids because they didn't have access to the school. Anyway, there was, 220 kids in a building. Eventually a window got broken. So the second year Parliament had a JC, effectively, like a Summerhill Judicial Committee. And this kid was hauled up before the Judicial Committee and he was fined £4. The caretaker was asked to come along, the janitor, and say what would the repair cost. He said it would be £4, which is quite a lot of money then. So they fined him £4. And his parents accepted this and said they thought it was quite fair and it would come out of his allowance. But as well as fining him £4, another committee of the Grade 8 Parliament organised a fundraiser to pay his fine for him because they didn't really think he did it deliberately. So that's a nice story. The kids imposed the justice and then restored it themselves. Yeah, well, that'll do. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. And am I saying your name right, Andrea?
Yes, Andrea. I have a story that I experienced while I was at a democratic school in Germany, in South at Capriole. The students had one annual field trip they would go on, and in the last year it didn't go so well because some had alcohol with them, which was not allowed by the school committee. And there were a lot of conflicts. So the teachers were quite overwhelmed with their tasks. And they said, well, this year we cannot accompany you to the field trip. So we just cancel it and figure out a way to make it better for next year. So the students, they were shocked by this because to them it was really very important. And some sort of conversation started between the students and the teachers. And then the students made a list of how to make the school trip better and easier also for the teachers so that they can join. They voted, they made a plan, they presented the plan in the teachers' conference. Some things were accepted, then 2 teachers said, okay, under these conditions I can come. And then they did it again, and then more teachers joined. And I was one of the teachers who went on the field trip. And in the evening, like at 12 at night, I would walk the corridors, and the children that had given themselves evening duty were like, okay, be quiet. Some of us want to sleep. So they regulated basically almost everything by themselves so that the field trip could happen in a harmonious way like everybody wanted. It was really touching to see how it went.
It's amazing how students step up. Ashley, my coworker with that program, we were standing in the doorway of the classroom at one point, observing what was going on. And his comment was, have you noticed that when we step back, they step forward, or how much they step forward when we step back? And we need to really help people appreciate that these students have so much to offer if we just get out of their way. Thomas, you mentioned something I wanted to get back to, just that sense of belonging and the kind of clubhouse that the students had. Ashley and I were assigned this nice classroom for our program. And we're standing there, we'd gone in like teachers do a week or so ahead of time to get the classroom all set up, looking good. And we went in there and it had been set up during the summer by the caretaking staff to be a really traditional school. Tables with chairs behind them, everything facing front. And we said to each other, what do we want to do with this? And so we were actually silent for about 30 seconds, wondering how to answer that. And then Ashley said, I don't think we should do anything with it. I think we should let the students decide what to do with it. And so what we did then is we just went all through the school scavenging, taking whatever we could find, teachers that had left and weren't coming back that had an extra table in their room or extra shelves, partitions from the storeroom. We just looked in every corner of the school to see what we could find, moved it into that classroom, moved the textbooks in and other papers and that, so that When the students arrived, it looked like they were arriving into a storeroom, and just a mess. And they were a little shocked when they saw what they were walking into. I had the students for the morning part of the day. We were team teaching it. I had a half day with them, and Ashley had the other half day. And that was a way to get a little bit of, we wanted them to have more than just one adult that they were interacting with. Two allowed us to both have a fairly big part in the program, although we both felt a little alienated from it not being in there the full time. At any rate, I told them on the first day that as they came in that this was their room. We had brought all this stuff in for them to make use of as they saw fit. We get rid of whatever it was they didn't want, and let's think about the problem for 2 or 3 days, and then we'll try to get a solution to it. And so I had them for the rest of the day. That we were outlining the kind of tasks they would have to do to accomplish ministry courses, and at noon, I go back and I'm teaching in the regular part of the school. Ashley comes in to take over the class. I go back at the end of the day to see how it went with Ashley. And the room had been transformed. They just couldn't wait to get at making it their place to belong. And that became so important. When you think of school and where do kids belong in a typical high school, they have this little 1-foot slot locker in a hall with all kinds of people behind them. Some of them go to desperate lengths to decorate the inside of their lockers and get little shelves in there somehow. It's the only place that they have any sense of belonging in that big school. And here we had a family spot for these kids, to the point that at Christmas time, when school ends just after lunch and there's a ruckus going on in the school where all the other kids are misbehaving because they can get away with it the half day before school, all of our students were in our clubhouse, in our place where they belonged. They had arranged kind of a gift sharing program together. When the bell rang, the kids could leave about 12:15. The school went quiet. Not a single one of our students left. They were still hanging around. They started to drift out a little bit here and there, but it was about 2:15 that Ashley and I said, come on, you guys, we want to go home now. You got to leave. And so that sense of community just grew there. And when you experience that, I believed in my head everything about Sudbury Valley up to the time I ran that program. I didn't really have it in my heart. And so my experience is that it's not true that you can see it to believe it. You have to live it to believe it. And to witness these kids coming in with all these things that could be described as a lack of well-being, some mental illness even, healing in the process, and becoming happy and comfortable with themselves. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. And that's why I'm slave to this now. I see the damage being done to kids in this rigid, impersonal kind of system that we're running. And it's so criminal that I've got to work at it. I very much identified with Derry because Derry had the experience of applying democratic principles in a public school. And the experiences that I've read from his book so much overlap with mine. And what I found really interesting was he was able to do with a single age group, just grade 11 students, what I thought needed to have a cross-age mix in order for the kind of learning to happen that you wanted. He has convinced me that teachers can do this with the classrooms that they're given today, that you get, let's say, 25 11-year-olds, and you can be a democratic teacher with them. And he shows us how. So that was great. The thing about his program is what I feel was the strength of my program when it comes to what I want to talk about next. Next is, how do you scale it up? And to scale up these programs so that you can create a fundamental change in a whole system, my feeling is they have to be visible, and they're visible if they're running like the CHIP program was in a typical program, typical high school. They're visible with Derry running it in his school with the grade 7s or the I guess the 11 and then the 12-year-olds, and so you have that visibility there. And we had teachers that were looking in on our program. They couldn't not see it. It was right there. And also, it wasn't a case of a student had to have his parents help him to apply for a program that was in another school. It was entirely their choice. They decided if they were going to take the program or not. Some of the kids had to convince their parents that it was the right thing for them. They wanted to do it. So students were choosing to be in there. And it was as easy a choice for them as going into a conventional classroom or into a self-directed learning classroom. And when you have that happening, you've got the conditions set that when enrollment or the demand for that kind of program grows, very easy to make it 2 classrooms. And we had a plan. The school went through renovations while the program was running. And we proposed a way of taking out a wall, combining a couple of classrooms, putting in a folding door, adding a couple of little off rooms, so that you had a lot of versatility in a workspace that's right there in these boxy little old schools that are a problem for us because they're too confining. And we can open them up where there's the will. As you would expect, our proposal was not one of the ones accepted, but it would have been easy to have done that. The scaling up, I just indicated that easily done. If you have students that want to do it and you have administration that are interested, then you just get more teachers. And when it comes to professional development, we were just pioneering it. Ashley and I, we started off, it was like you said, Derry, that you don't know what you're doing, but at least you're doing it. And so we were struggling through that and becoming expert. I was also involved with the Faculty of Education in Ottawa at the same time. And there was a lady there running what was called Model 2. She had gotten a 3-year, a grant to run a 3-year program. Model 2 was preparing teachers to work in a self-directed learning environment, to be facilitators. And so you had Model 1, which was conventional teacher training, and then Model 2, which was teacher training for self-directed learning. So the students in that Model 2 program were themselves having to self-direct with the professor as the facilitator of that. And that program, one of the reasons that it didn't continue after the 3 years, and the plan was that it would if it was successful. It was successful. It didn't continue because it was too hard to find appropriate practice teaching placements for the teachers. It was just too conventional out there. And then when they graduated, there were not jobs for the self-directed facilitating teachers. And so it was a problem of the cart before the horse. And with our program, we fumbled with it. The first year was enough of a disaster that I thought that we can't do this again. It's just way too much work for too little gain. But it was that second year, having identified a problem with the facility that we were assigned to, the principal got this nice room for us. And that's when it really kicked off for us. And it's, I'm not sure where I was going with that. I get too busy. I should have notes like Peter Gray does that really keeps me on track. But you get the idea anyway, that it's a matter of fumbling along. I'm back on track now. We were there, and because we're visible and accessible, teachers on spares could drop in and spend time with our students, which they did at times. And so the possibility that you have right on the spot professional development, teachers learning together as teams, 2 spearheading it in our case, but the others dropping in. And we had about 5 or 6 other students on staff of a fairly large school that could have formed a really nice nucleus for the kind of program that Derry talks about, that 20% idea. That's another way to implement what we were doing and to involve more teachers in it. And so you grow it as it happens. But the growing of it, very possible. It's the next step is creating the political will within the board to make it happen. And that's what I would like to just hurry through now, so we have some time to talk afterwards. I'll go back to screen share here.
Richard, can I ask a question? It's Stephanie
Sure.
Schuler. Yeah?
Yes. Hi, Stephanie.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm driving. I hope this doesn't make you dizzy, but I'm going to go back onto no video. Okay, I have a few questions. To Thomas from Sudbury model, the one thing that you went on and on to say was that your kids were happy, the students were happy. You said it several times, like all the kids are happy. And so I'm curious, and I know I could look it up, and I've looked up lots about Sudbury model and various other models. Is happiness in your do you have a mission statement? Is that, I'm curious if that word is used, where that word is used in democratic schools, self-directed learning schools, versus conventional schools. Like, how high up on the ingredients list is happiness? And Richard, you said wellness, that kids, there isn't wellness in conventional schools. Yesterday, we talked about love in some of the talks, which was great. It was in the talk, Emmanuel and Liz Campbell talked about it. Are those words in our mission statements? Should they be in our mission statements? Like, we know it's a violation of human rights that kids' wellness, in school, from school, and general violence and horrific and terroristic, things, happen to kids, lots all over the world. But are these our words? Are these our important words? If you just had to name like tag words, is it happiness, wellness, self-esteem? Is this obvious or so I just wanted to ask that. Derry, all the schools that you've been a part of, I think that's part of your recipe, those words, happiness and wellness and love. And so, Thomas, I wanted to ask you in particular with Sudbury Valley, why did you say that to us? They're so happy, they're so happy.
Oh man, what a great question. And I'll go really quick, Richard, and hand it off to you within a few seconds here. It was such a shock for me. I was teaching as a regular teacher in the mornings to pay my dues in front of a classroom of kids, small classroom. And it was such a drastic, completely diametrically opposed difference between the emotional bringing of the morning young people versus the afternoon young people. So it was just a huge shock to me to see that such happiness could be possible in a place that might be called a school. And no, it's not in the mission statement. It's just a side effect that we have a working, reliable system that allows the young people to make choices. Happiness is a side effect. I'm going to just celebrate quickly that the United States Declaration of Independence says life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But the Constitution doesn't mention happiness. Constitution is how our country is supposed to operate and keep everything fair. It's a side effect, Stephanie. So big thanks for the question.
And thank you for your wonderful answer. And is that an important side effect for you as a teacher?
It's vital. It's essential. I mean, how can you have life where there's not laughter and just some kind of joy?
Derry, you want to add something in there?
Derry and then Derry, Richard.
Who's next, Liz?
Derry. After Jerry.
Oh, Jerry.
Jerry and Derry.
Jerry? So, Jerry, are you going to go ahead? I think
Derry.
you're muted, Derry.
Derry, your mic is muted, but we're hoping to hear from Jerry first and then you. Jerry first and then you. Jerry, are you listening?
I am, and I'm unmuted.
No, Jerry.
Okay.
Looks like Jerry is not there.
Okay. So then we'll go with Derry and then maybe Jerry. Go ahead, Derry.
Okay, just a quickie. I call these schools like Sudbury pioneers of possibility. And I think our task is to take that inspiration into the mainstream public school systems. And the pioneer of possibility for me was Summerhill, which I discovered by chance as a student teacher. And absolutely, in A.S. Neal's list of why he started the school, happiness is absolutely up there with a big capital H.
I'm going to jump in here, Liz, to respond to Stephanie too about happiness. I liked a comment that Daniel Greenberg said. I don't know where I read it, but he said, our job is not to make them happy. That's basically their job. And if we get out of their way, we're motivated, naturally motivated to try to find happiness, make our lives meaningful. And happiness, though, is not all love and hugs and that kind of thing. It's getting into the flow, really engaging in what's important to you. So you're not going to be seeing all the time these people with smiles on their faces. You'll see them engaged, and when they are out of being engaged, then their relationships are different, and you just, the happiness cultivates itself. You just have to get out of the way to let it happen.
Yeah, Monica has a question too, Richard.
Actually, it's not a question. I just want to move on to generate ideas on how to reach other people other than ourselves. That was the main
Yes, and
point.
Derry was leading to that too, which is what I want to get to next as well. And so I'll share my screen here and we'll deal with that. I went to the wall to keep the CHIP program running, and I wasn't able to do it. Couldn't convince the school authorities that we needed to be pursuing this direction. And I decided that the only way to accomplish that is to get the community mobilized. And so I created this Ottawa Public Education Remake Initiative website, co-founded it with some other people who were unschoolers who really wanted to be able to access some of the good stuff about public education. And we capped out around 600 people or so. Every additional person was a long, hard discussion. Part of the reason we couldn't grow more is that people were involved in other similar initiatives, and it just reaches a point where it's really going nowhere. And that's when the idea that we've got to get out of our silos and work together, because we're not a force with all our little groups going on. And so the Ottawa Public Education Remake Initiative became, for me, the Uniting for Children and Youth group. And Uniting for Children and Youth is not your conventional idea of an organization. It's conceived as just a meeting place for people to get out of their silos and work together. The thing that we did first that was most significant was to get involved with the school board elections. We had elections in 2018 and put out a real thrust there. And the idea was not so much to get our own trustees, the ones that we most preferred, elected. The whole campaign really was public awareness building. And so we asked the trustees these 5 questions: democratic values, systemic innovation. If you were to read them, you would see where they go, and they're all going in the direction that we want to go. We were basically forcing the candidates to take a look at all of these things that we're discussing as a way to give kids a better experience. And so that's a real awareness building process. During that time, during the elections, and it was a big discussion, like in the US, appointing the Supreme Court judge in the middle of an election, the old trustees we're in the process of appointing a new director for the board, new superintendent, as they say in the States. And so the top person, and it looked like they were just going to rubber stamp the protege of the one before, who I had absolutely no luck getting anywhere with. And we had enough awareness built up through this campaign and other stuff that we've been doing that we had enough of the trustees of the old group uneasy about just appointing this protege. The selection committee of 5 people put 3 names before the whole trustee body as potential new directors. And there had been enough uneasiness, articles in the newspaper and just all the campaigning we did here, that the trustees said, rejected those 3 and said, no, you gotta go look broader. And that resulted in us having the director that we have now, which to me is exactly the kind that we need. And so this kind of community work, building awareness, you don't even have to have 100 people sign some petition. You just have to create the impression that there's something happening here, and you don't want to be caught in the dark ages. Can we modernize? And that resulted in the director that we got. And shortly after that, Uniting for Children and Youth really came together on the basis of 3 things: equity, inclusion, and youth agency. A lot of the people have not made that whole journey to understanding self-directed education. And so we came together on this basis. If you're going to be fighting for equity, then you're not that far away from understanding that we're violating kids' rights in school. And so it gave us a group coming together that was uncomfortable, not happy with the way things were. The picture here, a little hard to see because of the size of it, but we realized that we're not going to go and talk to the people who are basically happy with the system, which is primarily middle-class people and up whose kids are doing well and they're going to go to university, and that it's the kids that feel that the system is hurting them. And so you can see from the variety of people in there, which Uniting for Children and Youth brought together. We have that new director. We want to create an impression on her, and we request a meeting, which she granted us. And so that's that whole gang. We had a circle meeting to share views with her, which I feel there were people in there that understood self-directed education. So it was in the air. And as they're talking about it, these other people that are not really that aware of it, but they're there because of equity and inclusion, they're hearing this other idea. So you're creating the opportunity to educate leaders in the community. And I feel there's been a real progress from just a year ago to what people understand about self-directed learning in this community now. The next main thing that we did was hold this conference in January of this year, just before the pandemic hit. And you can see some of the things that are being said here, what we're getting out there. If you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you're here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. That to me is the spirit that we want to have in programs like Dairies with Chip and the teachers. If we talk about democratic teachers, great sense of what it would be to be a responsible subversive as a teacher. And we have discussion points there. We had, these were MCs for it. It was held in a community center. We had a little over 100 people out. And the thing is that 2 of the people who came out were directors of the 2 huge school boards in this area. I've mentioned recently that one of them has $1 billion budget and the other one not much less. So we're talking about a lot of teachers, a lot of students, and those directors came out. They both brought superintendents with them. And so we're getting it out into the community. Things are are being thought of differently. And now the thing that we're working on now is this conference, and it's just come together so well, as if the moment is right for it, that I'm hoping everybody on this call and everybody that they know is going to register for this conference in order to create a groundswell that really tells the people that we have in charge that things have to change. Let's come out of COVID with a whole new, on track to a whole new approach to learning. And so this is the first page of the conference, and it's built on November 20th. We have a lady here who's been super involved in issues of human rights, justice, Black Lives Matter, and really understanding that we have to make change with children, that they're much easier to get on a healthier track than it is to undo what's been done to the adults and get them to do things differently. I'm an example of how difficult that can be. And so we have this coming together. June Gervin is the one that got the city to declare November the 20th, the Child-Friendly Community Day. The same day the UN has declared as World Children's Day, and Canada has declared the Child's Day. And so June, in getting it to the mayor of the city to proclaim it as the Child-Friendly Day, she got the support of the four. We have French school boards and English school boards in Ottawa. She got the support of all four directors of the school boards, the dean of the faculty of education, the different other groups, Children's Aid, a Jewish Orthodox community group that's pretty influential here. She got them all to sign this request for the mayor to declare Ottawa Child-Friendly Day on the 20th. And so all of those players are there for this proclamation. And it just creates the opportunity then, as it says here, that inspired by the Ottawa Child-Friendly Community Day and initiated by by Uniting for Children and Youth, we saw an opportunity here, which is what, if we want to create change, we've got to be watching in our communities for opportunities like this. This day is going to be celebrated. Let's have them celebrating self-directed education. Let's have us celebrating children having a lot more control over their education. And so we're trying to keep it in the realm of acceptability to the establishment people that are supporting it. And so it's after COVID, should we return to what was normal? How do parents create child-friendly homes? How do teachers create child-friendly schools? And then creating child-friendly communities beyond home and school. What do we have to do for that? And then are we the people we need to achieve what we want? And in order for us to be those people, we have to get out there into the community and create conversation. Without that conversation, without us talking to people that we go after the ones who are struggling in some way first, because they're normally more receptive. The people who are really comfortable, if you sense right away that they're not interested in change, they like it the way it is, you do what Ecology Ottawa, which is a local group trying to bring about change for environmental policies, you do what they do. Their message to their volunteers is go out and find our friends and don't worry about the others. And so you certainly go out and find the people who are most likely to be our friends first and build your momentum with that. When you think about just 1,000 people registered for the IDEC conference, if every one of them went out and just found 5 or 10 friends and urged those people to find 5 or 10 more, we could mushroom this thing so that an IDEC conference doesn't have 1,000, it has thousands. That this conference happening in Ottawa doesn't have maybe 500, but it's got thousands also. And every one of these things that we build turns into an opportunity to build the next one even bigger. And how do we go about doing that? It's a case of when we have an opportunity like a conference like this one, we jump on it. We don't fool around about it. Here's a way for us to get seen in the public and make things happen. As a couple of additional things that have come up recently with respect to this conference, there's a person, Stephen Hurley, who's an educator. You could read his, if you go under the bios here, he's involved in a session that's on the Saturday. And he's a person who's been involved in what's called Voice Ed. It's a 24-hour-a-day podcasting program, radio program that is speaking to teacher issues. And this is the session that he would be working on. He's the one on the right here. And when you read his biography, Stephen's been working in Canada's education space for over 35 years, serving as a classroom teacher, curriculum consultant, and teacher educator. He's the chief catalyst behind Voice Ed Radio, a 24/7 radio station dedicated to deepening the way we talk about education in Canada. He's known in the teaching community, and he's agreed to host the conference on at least the first day. The possibility of having the Prime Minister open the Prime Minister of Canada open the conference is really quite significant, and if not him, it would be surprising if he doesn't have an important surrogate to do it for him. Mayor of Ottawa will almost certainly be involved in it. And so the agenda, when you look at it, the first day for the schedule, the agenda, is really coming at things from where the people are who are supporting this, the people who have bought into the idea of the UN Child-Friendly City Day, Child-Friendly Community Day. And so the first two sessions are to recognize that. The third session is to really bring to the fore what Sir Ken Robinson says in his talk from May this past year, thoughts on the call to unite. And what he says there, it puts education into the global perspective, takes it away from just making school better. We're trying to make the world better. And that's the purpose of that third session. And then the fourth one is to deal with child-friendly homes. And so focusing on what does the home have to be like, because that's really where it all starts. And some of you would know Akila Richards, who's one of the founders of the Alliance for Self-Directed Education. She can't be there, but she's going to provide a 15-minute conversation starter recorded. And then we have two youth who have been unschooled that will be talking after that, either responding to what Akila has said or adding their own to it. One of them is Akila's daughter, and the other, if some of you know Stephanie Sewell, her son, 18 years old, is going to be the other one. And then we have two unschooling parents that will then be fed in. There'll be conversation with all of them, with one of the key people of Uniting for Children and Youth, who's a mindfulness coach, moderating that and adding in her own bit at times. When you look at Saturday here, it's all about the things that we want people to know. Yakov is going to be talking about democratic education. Derry's going to be following with what it is to be a democratic teacher in a public system, a state system. Democratic communities is Portsmouth, England, where youth were very instrumental at moving that community towards more democratic way of life. So it's looking at youth and community. Sense of well-being, some of you know Jim Flannery is going to be talking about very much from the student's eyes, and he'll have youth involved, what it is, the sense of well-being. What kind of environment do we need in order for us to feel good about who we are, what we're doing, and so on. Heather McTaggart is following that. She's the initiator of Unschooling School, which I think has the potential to be a movement to bring this whole thing to the attention of public education. And then the last two sessions are teachers, one from the public board, the other from the Catholic board. They're going to be introduced by their directors. And if you were to talk to either of them, you would say, these are not people that are speaking on behalf of the board. They're speaking on behalf of themselves and the children that they see being underserved. So at the same time, while it's a little critical here, the overtone is that we don't have to despair. We have those two directors, we have these two teachers as examples of the kind of personnel that we need within the school systems in order to get the kind of change cranked up that we want to see happening. How we make that happen is we make these opportunities like this conference setting the stage, we make these opportunities a success. So what's happened here is Uniting for Children and Youth has put this on the table. What happens to it is going to depend on all of us making it happen. There's, from my point of view, a lot of misunderstanding about how you build a base. And I've had some experience with this with the environmental and education work that I've done. And a lot of people think that, oh, you just need to get a good, catchy thing on Facebook and it will go viral. Good, catchy things about education tend not to go viral. The work that we have before us is a case of post something, send an email. But if you have a way of assessing, and we do with registrations for an event like this, have a look at who's registered after you have done a little bit of Facebook posting. And you'll probably find, or most often find, nobody registers because they saw a post about it. What you need to do is target those postings, those emails, to people that you feel you have a connection with, and then you have to follow it up. You give them a call and say, oh, did you see the email that I sent you yesterday or whatever? And they haven't had a chance to look at it, or they were going to get to it. Let me tell you what it's about, and so you have a chance to educate somebody there. And that's a personal conversation, which is going to educate somebody far better than a Facebook. And unfortunately, we're in the trenches, get the work done situation. There's no magic here. We've got to build the conversation, and the way I was just describing is the way you do it. So you send the message out, get it posted so that there's something that you can refer to, and then you start the conversation. And when you finish it, because registration is so easy, you might get them to register right there while you're on the call with them. And then also say, look, we need to grow this thing. Can you get 5 people to do the same? And then maybe get them to do the same. And you're sort of educating people as to how you create that mushrooming effect that turns into a groundswell. That's what we need to be thinking about, growing our base at this point. And the way I've seen IDEC and the whole conversation developing over the past 30 years or so is we have had to do a lot of defining, of trying to figure things out, what really works, what doesn't, getting used to the idea of something like Sudbury Valley actually working. But I think we're there now. We pretty much agree as to how kids have to be treated to flourish. What we really have to do now is still need to talk among ourselves, but far less of that and far more out in the public, talking to everybody. So I think that's my big message here. Should I get you all to register for the conference if you haven't already done so? And will you be getting off this call and going out and getting 5 or 10 people to register, and we get this thing mushrooming and make it that the next IDEC meeting is 5,000 people with at least half of them donating a nice little chunk because they realize the importance of it, and so on. What's the next step here? I leave you to respond.
I can do something. You can, I think I can send out newsletters about your conference, especially dedicated to your conference, to all the IDEC attendees and also those who have registered for IDEC. So I think that I can do.
That would be great. Everything like that. And when you do so, you'll be sending to people like us who are already on board with IDEC. And so
yes, probably that also is going to, yeah.
So,
so just the idea that the post alone doesn't get the job done. It's going to be the personal calls, and you can make that fun. I make calls to people that I haven't talked to for a little while and just touch base with them. So it's a chance to just firm up relationships a little bit at the same time. So it shouldn't be seen as work, but play.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. You can give me some ideas how we can do that. That would be very nice.
Maybe off the call we can do that somehow.
Yeah, sure.
I'll email you, Veda. I'm putting stuff out and to the point that people can trash my emails without looking at them. Now they know what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. That's extremely.
you aware of the time situation? So we have about 20 minutes left. I have just posted in the chat the link to register for the conference. So if everybody here did that, we'd have 20 or so more registrations, and then you can follow up with what Richard's saying. But I saw that Jerry was here, and so maybe we can give him an opportunity to ask his question. And also there's another question in the chat. Who would be the ideal target for this promotion? Are you thinking about teachers, family, policymakers? How can we help?
So I'll answer the question. Jerry, are you there? Because I'll do it after you've spoken if you're available. So maybe we can catch Jerry later. I think he's kind of in and out doing other things, trying to multitask. This conference, it's focused around Ottawa with the concept of work local, go global. We're trying to create with Ottawa an example that other communities can use in order to mobilize the people in their community. And we're looking at the community, the target for this conference as being the whole community, the concept that it takes an entire village to raise a child. We need all aspects of the community to raise our children. This idea that you send them off to school and the educators look after them for such a big part of their day, not having that flow that Darius talked about, where the school is a resource for the community and the community is a resource for the school. We need everybody playing for that to really open up. So the audience is everybody, primarily built with the luck of how people have come together in Ottawa around this child-friendly community day, serving as an example of how others might look for the opportunity within their own communities to do the same. November 20th, too late for everybody to get on board with that day this year. But with that declared as a child-friendly community day, what an opportunity for all of us to have big events kicking off on that day saying, let's really look at that UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. And so there's a book also that I share, written by a Canadian lady. The father of our current Prime Minister was responsible for building into our Constitution the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And this lady in Saskatchewan, an education professor, has written a book about education, the charter, the students, and And she makes it pretty clear that schools are not following the rights of the child with the way they're run. And so getting that information out is just so valuable. We have such an opportunity with that World Children's Day to stage events that, because it's community, you get the community players coming together on it.
Okay, now Jerry has arrived. So Jerry, if you could ask your question, and then we'll open it up to others.
Oh no, when he was doing stories, I've got about 300 stories about my old school, but I had a couple I was going to do, and some that happened afterwards, but then nobody called on me and I just got busy with other things. I mean, I can still tell them, but it's not in context now.
I would say, Jerry, it's in context because we need to know how we're succeeding. Can you give us one of them?
Okay. This happened a little more recently. I was asked to go visit a public at-risk school, and I'd observe and make suggestions, and I did. And then they asked me to come back and do a sample democratic meeting. So I came back and I did that, and we have video of it, and it's on the Arrow website. I think it's under the videos, and I can give people access to it if they want. But what happened is, at first you can see by the body language what the kids, what the reaction is to this idea. They're sitting back kind of like this, But after a while, they're closer, and then pretty soon they're on the edge of their chairs and participating. And it didn't take a whole long time. And so they afterwards decided that they would have regular meetings, which they did for the rest of their school year. Now that summer, their local district decided that they were going to cut back some teacher positions. And one of the ones was going to cut back was in that program. And of all the kids in the whole school district, the only ones who went into the school board to protest were those kids. And they attributed it to the fact that they had experienced that kind of empowerment.
And Derry, just a quick reinforcement of that. You found with your kids, I think, that they became more activist-like. Are you muted?
Okay, sorry, I say the same rude words to myself every time this happens, but you can't hear them, so it doesn't matter. Absolutely. And I think it's almost a sort of benign kind of heroin. One shot and you're hooked. Jerry's story completely makes sense to me. And I find that kids move towards understanding this way of working very, very quickly. And they develop, first of all, a kind of a practical sense of how to make the process work, then a kind of activist sense, and then a kind of moral development sense where they start to care for each other within the community and extend that caring out from their community as well. And this sort of happens but it happens much more quickly and readily. We don't have to be afraid of it. You can trust it. It was interesting, Richard, the conditions for making CHIP work. You had what I call the 3 T's, plus I would say the 4th T that Liz has added to it, that time, you got to have time to do it properly. You need the team, you need the territory, and then you work towards a really trusting set of relationships. And it sounded as if you had all that. So I completely recognize what you were talking about with CHIP.
I'll tell you one other public school story. And that is, I was teaching a remedial reading program, among others, to some kids in a public school. And I had a bunch of kids in there, but what we really didn't do remedial reading. We just let kids read anything they wanted, talk about anything they wanted, whatever. we were kind of in a back room. And at one point there was a kid who said to me, he just wanted to get kicked out of the school. And so, you know, he just tired of it. He just wanted to get kicked, couldn't stand it. I mean, this was the only thing he liked. So he walked out of the class and out into the hallway and lit up a cigarette. And then just started walking all the way down the hall slowly, smoking this cigarette, all the way down to the end, all the way back. And I'm sure that if any teachers looked at him, they would go like, nah, you know. They wouldn't have even believed it, you know, or registered. And they didn't kick him out.
Liz,
At one point, he did something else to get himself. He asked me to send him down to the office. He said, "It's ridiculous. You know, they'll know that something's funny because I never sent anyone there." But I sent him down and with something or other. And then the principal was smart enough to realize what he was trying to do and didn't kick him out.
yeah, good. Yeah. Liz, do you want to take charge?
Agency at its best, Jerry. Agency at its best. So just a couple of things. I've put the link to the conference in the website. If while you're listening, you could just click on it, register, it costs nothing. We're trying to get the numbers up, and we're trying to get the attention of the Prime Minister of Canada to come and do the opening remarks, and at the same time raise his awareness of what the other possibilities are. So if you can do that while you're listening and share it with some friends, but don't just share it, like Richard said, share it and say, hey, can you just do me a favor, register for this? And you know, they'll have access to videos later. Sky, and I want to try this, Srinavs Kumur, did I say it right? He posted a comment in the chat, and I'd like him to elaborate. And also David, is he still here? Yeah, he's still here. Yeah, maybe David, you could speak to. And then I also see Marianne and Charlie, some young people, and I'd love to hear what they have to say about what they've heard. If that's okay, Richard, if you're okay with that.
Oh no, this is great. Thanks, Liz.
Okay, shall I start? I just want to note that to sort of, I definitely agree with the thought that we should like propagate and like get the thought out to the public, the general public, mainly I think the educated public and the professional public, like teachers and the schools. And but when I've tried this, and I talk to my friends, like teachers from standard state schools, I usually find out that they can't understand the concept at all. They just don't get how it can work. They can't imagine even how the freedom and the cooperation with the kids on equal level can work, because they don't have the experience. It's very hard to persuade people who lives and work in some environment for many, many years. Maybe even they don't need to work in there. They can have just the experience as a child from their school. So they can't imagine that this can work at all. And it's very hard to get them on track to try it out or even think about it, that it's possible to do it this way. And so, I mean, the reason or the way how to do it, I think it's to talk about it. That's the first step. But I think the major thing is to experience it and to see the sort of outcome and the results. So I would say for me, it's the best way probably is to like put on display the kids who went through this sort of education, because they can express by their words how they felt and what they did and how they work in the system, and the teacher will see that there is some like real impact and real results in this way. So but either way, it's hard work to persuade people who doesn't have the experience and they can't live the experience by themselves to see it. So that's the limit of this. But I think definitely I agree with the thought, with the idea to make it, spread it out and have it connected with other people.
David, if you're able to attend session 4 on Friday the 20th, we have 2 unschooled students that are going to be involved in that session. I think that you'll see that, and it's only a start, but you'll see that they're the seeds of what we need there. What you're saying, that the unschoolers, those who have lived it, get the experience. The other thing that I've found is that it's almost more beneficial to be talking to parents than to teachers. That when parents start to say, hey, why aren't you doing this? It's somehow or other, it's more impactful than if it's somebody like me, an educator, going and saying, why aren't you doing this? You're more apt to be told not to meddle, stick to your own business. But if it's parents in the community saying, we really think that things could be better. Can't you start trying some of this? And you don't need a lot of parents to do that, but we certainly need to get that kind of conversation started. Liz, you're in charge of this.
So Gary has his hand up, so I'm thinking he wants to make a comment about that, but we are going to go to Marianne and Charlie and then Sky. So is your comment relevant to this, Derry?
It's very relevant to what Richard and David have just said. Yes, I'll be quick. We need a completely different approach to teacher training programs. Teacher training programs should be run as democratic learning communities. That's the best way for student teachers to learn to do it. And then we need laboratory schools like John Dewey's school or like the Laborschule at Bielefeld in Germany, so they can go and learn on the job with teachers who are doing it.
You're muted, Liz.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, no, good to see you doing it. I thought you were perfect till now.
Far from it, far, far, far from it. I couldn't agree more, Derry, and that's what I do. That's why I do what I do. I'm in teacher education, trying to help create that shift, as I know others are as well. Marianne and Charlie, are you ready to put in your 2 cents? And then maybe we'll hear from Sky. And I don't see any other hands up. I see maybe Veda's, I don't know what he's doing. He's
we're running out of time.
Clapping, but we are running out of
Can I come in?
We've got plenty of time, Richard. We don't have any extra session for this evening, so we can continue as long as you want.
Long day for a lot of you. Not so much so in Canada. I think it was Marianne and Charlie that were going to speak next. Am I right, Liz?
It doesn't matter. But we also need to hear from Bruno because he's made a few comments in the chat that I think are very relevant. So who wants to go next? This is a democratic room.
Yeah, can I come in?
Tell us how
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah.
So